Welcome to the Academy on Capitalism's YouTube channel. Today, we're going to discuss the 3 things everyone should know about taxes, but probably doesn't. That's right, 3 things about taxes, not just that they're necessary, right, that and death, but 3 things that we need to consider when we're thinking about tax policy, especially raising or cutting taxes. Well, let's start with cutting taxes. So, if we talk about cutting taxes, the first thing that people will think about is the program that they love. This is understandable. They love it. They think it does good in the world. And tax cut means less money. Less money means that it can do less things and less good for the citizens it serves. And hence, people tend to oppose the tax cut or a tax cut based on the fact that it will reduce government services for that segment of the population or for that function that the government serves. And that is understandable. What people don't think of is how much of their money goes, how much of any tax dollar goes to the programs you love versus the programs you hate. In a country equally divided, or roughly equally divided by red and blue team folks, half of your money is going to go towards what the opposition wants it to go towards. It's not a bug, it's a feature. It's the democratic, right? I'd say the democratic system or a constitutional republic, but however you want to put it, both red and blue voices have a seat at the table. And neither side ever says, well, yeah, you're right. You take all the tax revenues. Our programs, nah, don't worry about it. Nobody ever does that. They fight tooth and nail at the municipal level, at the state level, at the federal level. Your opposition is alive and well and effective, which means that part of your tax money, at least half, is going to go fund programs that you don't value, don't like, or actively find immoral. That you don't value, don't like, or actively find immoral. And so when we discuss tax cuts, not only should we think of the programs that perhaps we favor, but we also should keep in mind that the programs that we disagree with and might even spend our lives opposing, they'll get less too. Which way you think is better, well, I'll leave that judgment to you. But people ignore that side of the equation. Similarly with tax raises and increases. If you think there should be a tax increase for a program that you love, you advocate, you find essential to the well-being of the country, do note that half the money from that tax raise will go to fund the exact opposite. You are funding your opposition. So let's take a controversial case. Immigration, right? So if you believe there should be a tax increase to help indigent, undocumented people in the United States, and that we should pay more in taxes in order to support them, because they are people, right? Can't let people starve. We need to do that. Okay. We raise taxes. Some more money goes to them. But you know what? Some more money goes to building a wall. Some of that money goes to hiring more border guards, more immigration agents. It goes to Homeland Security. You can't stop it. You're funding the very system that's causing the problems for the undocumented workers that you say you care about. Similarly, if you want to raise taxes to pay for the wall, I'm sorry to say, or actually I'm not sorry to say because it's a fact of the system, that at least half your tax dollars are going to go to pay for other things, and things that you find quite repugnant. Cities get tax dollars, federal tax dollars. So all those sanctuary cities, they're going to get your money, right? Those programs paying for education, food, or whatever else for illegal immigrants, you're going to fund. Your money's going to pay for them. And see, here's the thing. We're taught from time I can remember, and it's still the case, we're taught that, you can change the world. We get to vote. You can go and make a difference. In effect, saying you could go and get a law passed or something done so that your side and what you think is right gets all the goodies, and that the bad side and them, they get nothing. They get bupkis. Never has been true, never will be true. Right? We hang our hat on that. We're going to raise taxes, or we're going to get tax money for the things we want, and we're going to go in there and show them and not give them anything for what they want. So I just hit the table. That's why everything, and it doesn't happen. It's a fairy tale. You might think the trade-offs are worth it, but think of it in that terms. Or in those terms. It really is a trade-off. For whatever your tax money that you favor is funding, you're funding the exact opposite. Might it not be better to just decrease the funding across the board? And that's another way to look at tax cuts, that we are decreasing the funding for the programs that we find reprehensible. Something to think about. But please do not forget, whether you're red or blue, whatever favored program you have, the exact opposite will be funded by your tax dollars as well. Now, let's go to the second thing we need to realize about taxes. So, just about any time money changes hands anymore, the federal government has its hand in your pocket. Pretty much. But it's actually worse than that. It's not just the money changing hands. It's any time the value changes hands. So if I give you something that you value more than I do, and you give me something in return that I value more than what I gave you, that's taxable. Barter is taxable. People might not report it, but that's illegal. But what's more important is that the government, federal, state, and local, view it as their right to get a cut of that transaction. Every transaction. And think about it this way. Say I want to trade a book. We both want to trade books. I like books. You can see a bunch behind me. Say we want to trade books. I got one I haven't read in forever because I got it as a gift and I didn't like it, but it's on my shelf. Same to you. You did. Now here's the thing. I could let that book sit on my shelf forever. Government all quiet about it, right? I could throw the book away. Ooh, don't like that idea, but I could throw it away. Book gone forever. I could destroy value without being taxed at all. However, the moment I get together with another human being and I prosper from the transaction, and they do as well, so now I have a book that I value more than what I had. And the same to you. The government's like, I get a piece. Or I should get a piece. You should pay me. I want you to think about that. Is there a better way to dampen value creation and making lives better off? Is there a better way to depress that than to insert yourself into every single transaction and only scrape off the top when there's a gain? Right? If I throw it away and lose it, the IRS doesn't come in and say, "Oh, hey, you lost some value there. Here, we'll give you back what you could have earned on it." That's not going to happen. That's not even a fairy tale. The kids wouldn't even believe that. You couldn't tell them that, right? Witches and goblins are more believable. So the federal government and state and municipal governments, anytime value is created, there they are. And this is what's important, it's not just a matter of funding. This isn't a matter of just, well, we need money for X, Y, and Z. That may or may not be true. What it is an assertion of the government's prerogative or right to that money. It's theirs. And you often hear people talking like that. The government's losing money because of this tax loophole. The government, the government's losing money. The government's not getting its money, right? The government's not recovering the money owed to it. That's the part I want to focus on. That's the part that's been a sea change, especially in the second half of the 20th century, and we're going well into the 21st right now. The state, the government, view any transaction where value is created as its business and as its due a cut. And that cut depends on basically what the state determines. I also want you to think of the extent of that. How many of our relationships as we walk through this world are determined by mutually beneficial transactions, such that they could be taxed? I go to the store, I buy things online, I might trade or barter with people, I join clubs, I donate money. And you might say, well, that's tax-free. Oh, look a little closer. A lot of restrictions on that too, right? That comes off your tax bill maybe, depending on a whole host of factors. So basically, it's only your closest, perhaps, relationships that are exempt from government scrutiny. And even there, if you're filing jointly, that's not going to be the case at all either. So in our voluntary associations, whether as employee or employer, as consumer, entrepreneur, in every single case where we deal with others, exchanging value for value, the government likes to insert itself. It actually doesn't like to. It insists that it's, well, their right to. And not only do they insert themselves into these relationships, they can tear your life apart. That's what an audit is, right? They can mandate that you turn over records, that you divulge X, Y, and Z, that you produce receipts, that you justify each and every one of them, right? Now you might say, well, how do you get compliance otherwise? Yeah, that's true, but that's the point. It's not just a matter of compliance. The compliance entails the government having the right to know about every single voluntary value-creating transaction you make in the world. That includes scholarships, includes all kinds of things that you wouldn't even think should be taxable, and nonetheless are. Now, you might say, well, this is all happening because, well, those value-creating transactions, they depend on a certain environment, a certain, well, you might say that the state inserting itself into these transactions the way it does is, well, to make sure that you pay for the things that are needed. Well, two things about this, and this is going to lead to our third point. We have to refine that the government's going to ensure that you're going to pay, because truth of the matter is, if you value something, if you think it's worthwhile, or you think it's really good, or I'll tell you, you probably fund that. You'll find some way to fund it, buy it, give to it, volunteer, whatever the case may be. In some way, shape, or form, if you find something truly valuable, you'll probably pay for it. Or people will figure out a way to have you pay for it as they provide it. That's not why the state is there. The state is there, going back to our first point, to make sure you give to fund the things you hate, because those are the things you're going to hold money back from. I don't agree with this immigration policy. I don't agree with this war or this conflict. I want butter, not bombs. I want bombs, not butter. Doesn't matter. You don't get to choose. You don't get to say, I don't like this bit. I'm not funding it. Oh, yes, you are. And that's precisely why the state's there watching, to make sure and enforce, not that you pay for the good things, that you pay for the bad things from your perspective. So please remember that. This isn't a fair system. The enforcement isn't there to make sure the good is done. It's there to precisely ensure that you support, advance, and make possible all the things that you think are awful. Well, you could also then say, okay, yes, but business, whether it's individual or groups, once again, they need that atmosphere and to conduct business in. We can see countries all over the world where that atmosphere does not exist. You can look at corruption indices, right? You can look at the Freedom of the World Index published by the Fraser Institute. You can look at a whole host of studies and reports where there are many regions in the world where the environment that we have in the United States that allows for such a thriving market economy just doesn't exist. And hence you don't have capital formation. And hence you don't have prosperity. You have poverty. You have reduced lifespans. You have hunger, even starvation. So this, whatever the system is that supports those business transactions, it needs to survive. It needs to live. Or else we could wind up with a system that impoverishes everybody, right? We could lose the very engine of our economic progress, this atmosphere, this infrastructure. I understand that argument. There's probably something to that argument, as there are to all of these arguments. But once again, people are overestimating the amount of money that's going towards the things that they find really important. So I got a little website open here. I'm going to click on it, okay? Ooh, so you can see the light shining on my face. So let's talk. You need people to enforce the laws, right? Can't have lawlessness, so we would say. Okay. So you need police. Okay. Do you realize that private security guards outnumber public police? And by no small amount. Now, it's going to depend on where you look on by how much. So there's a Time article here from, looks like 2023. And in the Time article, it says by 2021, there were about 2 police officers for every 1,000 civilians, but 3.1 security guards for every 1,000 citizens. Okay? 2 police officers, but 3.1 security guards. If you look at, there's an NPR article, November 7th, 2023, what happens when private security patrols public streets. And NPR quotes or refers to a New York Times study that says that most major cities now have at least 3 times as many security guards as police officers on their streets. So it may depend on the location, but wherever you are, there's more private security guards than police. And what that indicates, the first thing that indicates is that here's something actually people want, and the state is underfunding it, right? Now, this will mostly be local and state, not so much federal when it comes to police officers. But once again, to say that, well, the reason the state has to be there in those transactions to create value is to take that money necessary to support the structure that we need? Well, if we go with time, which is the one that's the lower figure, 3 out of 5 security personnel are privately provided. The funding that the state is taking, whatever they're using it for, they're only providing about maybe 2/5 of the demand for that service. I don't know where the rest of the money's going, but you see what I mean. There's a demand out there, a perceived need for the protective services that police offer, and the state isn't funding it. This isn't the police department's fault, right? This has nothing to do with the officers who are on the streets and doing the things that they need to do. I'm talking about tax dollars. And if you're going to tell me that my tax dollars, the whole reason I have to suffer that the United States government and whatever state I live in and whatever municipality I live in is constantly sticking its nose into my value-added transactions and taking money away from that is to support the police, it's not. It's minimally doing that. And they do take enough money. It's just going to other places. Well, you might say, well, other things are expensive. So, you have to have you have to have roads, right? The goods and services that you rely on, for the most part, wouldn't get to you without roads. So perhaps we don't have enough money for police officers because we're spending so much money on just one hell of an infrastructure and roads. Well, I'm going to click on this here. If we go to the American Society of Civil Engineers, they publish a report card. America's infrastructure score, right? C-. Oh, it gets even better than this. It's even worse than this. So if you can go to infrastructurereportcard.org, right? And you can look at the history of the report cards. See if I can find it here. I had it open. I'm gonna have to open this to full screen. There we go. So if you open it up, like in 1988, we had a bunch of C's, a few B-, and a couple D's. You start going to 1998, now we have a couple of C-, a lot of D's and D-, an F and a bunch of D's. And it gets worse. 2001, 2005, 2009. I don't even see a B on there. 2013, we get a B- in solid waste removal. How nice. Right? Let's take a look here. Dams. Dams get D's. The highest score they got was a D+, a dam. You know what happens if a dam breaks? How about bridges? That was recently in the news. C-, C+, C+ in 2013, C+ in 2017. So go look at it. Infrastructurereportcard.org, right? This is by the American Society of Civil Engineers. It's terrible. Our infrastructure's falling apart. It's crumbling. So, for whatever reason, the state, at all its levels, is inserting itself into all of my voluntary relationships and demanding money because of its value-added proposition. Barely value-added. And once again, we do collect a lot of money. It's just not going to the roads. Remember what I said back in point 1? Think we should raise taxes for the roads? Maybe a little bit will go to roads. A lot more will go everywhere else. You don't believe me? Look at the report cards. It can't be that the money's going to fund the roads. It can't be that the money's going to fund more police. Certainly not what's being demanded. But finally, I'd say, well, laws, right? We have courts where business disputes are adjudicated. And that framework is important, right? Fair, quick resolution to commercial disputes is key to a well-functioning economy. Take a look at arbitration. Now, I haven't found overall statistics like I have with the police and civil engineers. But time and time again, we see reports and claims that mandatory arbitration is on the rise. Why is it on the rise? Because arbitration is done in a matter of months, litigation in a matter of years. Arbitration, relatively inexpensive compared to the huge expense of litigation. And in litigation, you also have appeals. If you are a smart business person, you're going to go to arbitration. I'm not saying that system's perfect. There are a lot of issues about employers and employees and mandatory arbitration. And it's fun. We need to talk.